screen. I don't know if there's any way for me to sort of know, to get a response. Maybe Albert, the host, maybe you can give me an indication that everyone can see and hear me okay, and also see the screen. My name is Ebo Richardson. I am the what we call the Chief Enablement Officer here at Absa Bank Ghana. And what the Chief Enablement Officer does is essentially to make sure that the bank can have the right tools, the right technologies, the right capabilities, essentially, to continue to be effective, to continue to serve customers well. So I look after a number of departments. I look after the technology department, the program management and change department, the process improvement, and then also digital enablement department. So that's what I do. I have to make sure that the bank works well. Today, I just briefly wanted to share some of my own experiences and insights with you around change and particularly the security elements of change. I doubt if anything that I'm about to say is really novel or cutting edge, but I think it's important that we put some emphasis on some key practices that will ensure that we don't fall prey to those out there who want to do damage to us and to, as I like to say, to reap where they haven't sown. Okay, so that's essentially what the conversation is about now. How I propose to do this is I'm aiming to sort of speak for around 30, 35, maybe 40 minutes, depending on how it goes. And then I will have a conversational session, or what we popularly known as Q&A session, during which all of you can sort of ask questions, and then we have a conversation. Also, you may post your questions to the chat area, and then I can pick it up at the end and then try to tackle those as well. So without further ado, I think I will kick it off. So if we can have the next slide, please. Okay, so I start with this and I call it the change imperative. That is the need for change. I mean, it's obvious. We hear it all around us. You know, change is the only constant. We hear so many other things. But change is difficult. Change isn't something that sort of comes naturally. You have to have the right mindset, the right attitude to be able to do change and to do it well. So it is something that, you know, if we had our own way, we generally tend to want to sit in our comfort zones and be comfortable, you know, and don't rock the boat and all that. But we are living in a world where change is the order of the day. Change, you know, is sort of you know, all around us and happening all the time. And there are reasons for that. You know, or they're driven by a number of things. First of all, we're seeing continuous advances in technology. So technology is coming up with new things, new ways, new methodologies, new access routes, so many things that just give us new dimensions to how we engage as human beings, to how we do business, to how we communicate. And the more these technologies become more prevalent, the more we find new ways of doing things. And new ways of doing things means change from the old ways. So change becomes, you know, the mainstay of our lives and our businesses and our engagements, etc. Okay. Another key driver of change is essentially globalization. And globalization is a key driver of change because you have, you know, global forces, market forces, which are trying to, you know, innovate and come up with new things. And those new things obviously then require moving from old to new. So you get a lot of that. There's a lot of capitalism behind that whole globalization movement. Then we have also, you know, the consumer. Now, we're seeing more consumer power, as in, you know, me, you, individuals, because consumers are becoming more aware. As we get technology that makes the world smaller, we start to see what is possible elsewhere. We see what is possible on Facebook, in Google platforms, and then we want to try and mimic those possibilities, or we expect that our experiences will be equal across whatever channels that we engage with. So that consumers having access to vast amounts of information, having access to, you know, different technologies creates a sort of an expectation. They really want to, you know, people now, for instance, want to bank the same way that they interact with Facebook. because they're used to that and it's comfortable and convenient and friendly, and they don't understand why they can't use the same sort of interaction methodology even to bank or to do other things. So consumers are also driving this in a big way. And then we have convergence. So there's so many things, we have our own countries, jurisdictions, you have Africa, you have Asia, etc., and that traditionally have been different sort of cultural norms that permeate those environments. But there are certain things also that become common amongst us as we start to move together and work together and live together and do so many things together. So that also drives change. And the last one I have here, dare I say it, is pandemics. Who would have predicted COVID? And here we are living in a post-COVID era where so many things are bound to change because this pandemic has really driven an agenda that none of us expected. So change is not going anywhere. Change is going to, be the order of the day, and continuous change is what will, we all have to brace ourselves for. Now, the next slide here, I've put essentially a quote from the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. And it's a very profound quote, and I felt that it would be relevant for this conversation. But what it says is the pace of change has never been this fast, yet it will never be this slow again. Now, my friends, think about this. This is very deep, because what the Prime Minister is saying here is that we are doing things quicker, engaging, embracing, providing services, providing solutions. We're doing those quicker than we have ever done before, and yet we will continue to do them quicker still. Now that is profound, because what that means is if you don't adopt a change agility mindset, if you don't change your attitude to change, if you're resistant to change rather than embracing it and going with the flow, you might find yourself being sidelined very quickly. Whether you're an individual, whether you're a small community or group, or whether you're a large organization or corporations, you need to have this kind of attitude to change in order to ensure that you remain relevant. But it is important that we emphasize that the fact that we need to change and sort of move quickly should be balanced out by a need to observe safety and care. You can't just do things haphazardly. You will still get into trouble. So I think that is a very important message that fits into this. Now, the other side of it is that change comes with risk. There is no change that doesn't open up an element of risk. So change and risk sort of travel hand in hand. This creates a very interesting sort of dynamic for us. We have to change, but change comes with risk. Then why do I have to change? Now, first of all, before I address that, let me pick up on, why change comes with risk, or, the elements that drive that. First of all, change is doing something new, something you haven't done before, something that is not the status quo. That means that there's an element of unknown or uncertainty. And uncertainty of outcome is the very definition of risk. So the fact that you're going into areas that you don't know means that you are introducing risk. The second thing is that when you're bringing about change, you're likely to introduce new vulnerabilities because you're changing how things were set. You might be moving furniture around in your house. You might be, changing your tires on your car. Whatever you're doing, there is an element of vulnerability that if you're not careful, you will introduce that could come back and haunt you. The third thing is disruption of performance challenges. Using the example of the car again, if I change the wheels on my car, I might actually fit something that isn't optimal, and that might create a performance challenge. Maybe the pressure in my tires isn't the right pressure. And what that does is it means that I'm buying more fuel, and my car will become fuel inefficient as a result of the fact that I've changed my tires. So change can bring certain disruptions or performance challenges, which may erode satisfaction, goodwill, and other things like that. And then there is also discontentment, the fact that, or even resistance, the fact that you're changing something. People tend to be set in their ways, human beings. So they're used to how things were working, and then you're changing them. You can have some resistance or some dissatisfaction, which may impair how you engage with your constituents. So that is also another factor that creates an element of risk. So we have all these things which create risk potentially when you bring about change. That means the change should be something that you do with some care. You cannot just approach change in a willy-nilly way. If you can move on to the next slide, please. Now, we say that we want to ensure that we have secure change, or change that is well controlled. And that is important, as I've shown in the previous slides, that if you don't apply change in a positive, well controlled way, you create gaps that could be easily exploited. So we need to ensure that we bring about change that is secure. But why do we need to ensure this? Well, let's look at it this way. Number one, there is an increasing body of dubious criminal elements. There are people out there, lots of them, who are tooling themselves up to try and reap where they haven't shown, to try and perpetrate fraud, damage your organization, etc., etc. There are so many individuals and organizations alike that are there to do that. Number two, we're actually seeing an increase in fraudulent behavior, in terrorist activities, money laundering, espionage, etc., etc. We're seeing an increase. Perhaps the advent of technology is driving that increase, the fact that now you have tools to be able to do that. But we're seeing that more and more. And if you look around, you can see that there are regulatory bodies, governments that are trying to implement measures to combat that. It is not for nothing that the Bank of Ghana has instituted a directive, the Cybersecurity Directive, requiring all financial services players to ensure that they have standardization when it comes to providing security from a risk perspective. It is not for nothing. They're doing that for a reason. And this is something that we're seeing, in most other parts of the world. We're seeing anti-money laundering legislation, which is designed to prevent, certain dubious terrorist funding and the like, or even just purely money laundering, where people are trying to legitimize illegitimate cash. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of that. That means that the attack vector increases as there's more of these things, then we all come into scope for attack, and we need to be mindful of that. And as I said before, the next point is around technology. You see, everybody's connected, from us as individuals with our phones and other devices, tablets, etc., to shops and small entities which are all networked, to large global corporations which are fully networked. And we're all fully networked, and we're all connected to the internet. That means that everybody is potentially a victim of attack. Right? Even in our homes, we have connected our TVs and our fridges and so many other things to the internet using what they call the Internet of Things. So now everybody is in scope. Maybe 20, 30 years ago, only certain entities were connected, and therefore only certain entities could be attacked. But today, potentially you and I could also be attacked. This is the world in which we live now. Now, we can't say switch everything off or disconnect everybody, because we find so much value in that connectivity. The total network effect that is created is something that we're reaping, immense benefit from. So you're not going to switch it off, but at the same time, the fact that it's there creates opportunities for those that could potentially harm you. So there is lots of opportunities that could be exploited. And what happens is, when we do change, if we're not careful, then we can create additional vulnerabilities, like gaps, that can be exploited. And so in implementing a change that you expected to do something positive for you, you may end up having your organization being brought to its knees as a result. consider all the change-related incidents and breaches that we hear about. Recently, I think in the newspapers, a bank was supposed to have been taken for a ride to the tune of 46 million Ghana cedis because of certain steps or missteps, I should say, and it was blasted in the headlines on the front of newspapers. And these are all things that we need to be mindful of. So ultimately, we need to ensure that we have secure change so that that contributes to the overall effort to protect our corporate and socioeconomic interests. We need to make sure that we keep those interests, our benefits, our assets safe from dubious people who would otherwise try to deprive us of them or even try to damage them in some way. Okay? Now, what does that mean? So far, if you're following me, I think we have established maybe three key things. Number one, we've established that we need to continually change. You cannot stay as you are. Even those individuals amongst you, if your skill sets and your knowledge remains as it is today, by next year, nobody wants you anymore. So we need to continually change to stay relevant and to win, to chalk up successes. Number two, we have also established that change introduces risks and vulnerabilities because change takes us into an unknown. The fact that it takes us into an unknown means that there are certain things that we may not know or we may not be aware of, we may not deal with appropriately. So therefore, there's an element of risk introduction wherever changes are delivered. And then number three, we've established that threats and opportunities for exploiting weaknesses are on the rise. So the general trend, in the world, on the globe, is that we see more of these activities happening everywhere. There are so many instances of reports around, fraud or, data breaches or privacy breaches. There's so many. Almost every single day, you will see tons of these reports in various media outlets across the globe. So if you bring these elements together, the fact that we need to change, continually change, and change fast, the fact that change introduces vulnerabilities, and then the fact that there are threats out there growing almost exponentially, waiting to exploit vulnerabilities and weaknesses, then that creates a bit of a conundrum. I need to change, but if I change, I might end up dead. So how do I balance that? So I guess the question that this then poses is, how do we deliver changes? Particularly because we're in a digital type change to disruption, while at the same time ensuring that we maintain an effective, well-controlled, secure sort of environment, that we don't fall prey to some of those dubious elements that I've mentioned before. How do we do that? And that is the question that I am hoping to briefly address through my own experiences for the rest of the session and with the questions and answers as well. Okay. Now, for me, the answer is, it sounds simple, but it really isn't simple. But I think it sounds simple, and it's not rocket science. But I think it's the way to go, particularly when you're talking about more critical, large-scale change. I think the answer is to achieve effective balance between change agility, that is that whole speed, expediency around change, versus security and control, to achieve an optimal balance between the two. And I will discuss how I believe that can be done in a minute. But I think once you achieve that balance, then you can bring essentially the best of both worlds. You can have a pacey or speedy time to market around change, whilst at the same time ensuring that you don't compromise on your controls or your security. Okay. And to embed security into the delivery process. I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute, what I mean exactly by that. But I think it's important to underscore that, sorry, we're still on the previous slide. I think it's important to underscore that security must not be an afterthought. A lot of the time what we do is we build things and we create this and we create that, and it's all exciting. We look at it from the the user interface perspective and what customers want, and the marketing perspective. We do fantastic stuff, and then somewhere along the line, close to the end of the process, we get, oh yeah, we have to secure it. And one thing that I have to say is that bolted on security, or security that you add after the event, is often the weakest form of security, other than no security at all, of course, because it's an afterthought. It doesn't gel. It's not well embedded and well sort of synergized with the overall product. So essentially what I'm saying is two things: is we need to achieve balance between control and agility. We need to ensure that we embed security into the delivery process. And to do that, I believe that one of the most effective ways to do that is to ensure that you have a self-contained unit, whether virtual or real, that has all the capabilities to deliver the change. And when I say all the capabilities, I mean everything. And if we go to the next slide, I will explain a bit more what I mean, more specifically. So, achieving better balance, what does that mean? Well, first of all, you're talking about ensuring that what you put out there exhibits both the hallmarks of user-friendliness, meeting customer needs, etc., but also robust, secure, resilient. You want all of that. And I believe that the way to do that is to ensure that the team that drives that delivery is a multifaceted, multi-talented team that can look at all those aspects together as part of the delivery. Typically, what we do in our organizations is we have the delivery team, or the project managers, or the project teams, where we either compose them sort of coming from different areas of the organization, matrix organizations, and then we drive things that way. Or we have the core project team, which just interacts with other colleagues or other teams in the organization. My experience has been that if you want these things to go, complete and the whole hub, then you want to essentially make everybody accountable for that delivery. Together. Of course, there will be a leader, but everybody must be accountable in equal measure. And what that then means is that you change the focus, the orientation of some of those people who are coming from the control functions, not just to police, which is what we tend to see, but collaborate. Because if you're policing, you're coming and saying, this won't work, that won't work, this is a risk, this is an issue. That's your mindset. And you are measured on that. And that's another thing that I will talk about in a minute. You're measured on that. So your performance criteria or your performance contract is to find issues and roadblocks and things and report them, not to assist in the delivery necessarily. So I think that orientation needs to change, because once the orientation changes and your performance contract is, let's make this thing happen, but make it happen securely, then the people coming from the control functions essentially want to find ways to unblock the roadblocks rather than simply just pointing out that there are issues here and there, you need to deal with it. And they have the expertise, because they're looking at it with a lens or from a different angle, they have the expertise to then be able to uniquely unblock those roadblocks. Okay, so the first thing I put here, is the operating model balances agility with control. So the organization or team or whatever that's taking on this new endeavor must have good balance. The people in the team must have security competencies and capabilities, as well as the delivery and the user-friendly design, user interface, design thinking, all those nice buzzwords that we tend to throw about these days. There needs to be that balance. You cannot have just it going in one direction and not the other. There are a couple of ways to achieve that. One is sort of longer term, and the other is more sort of shorter term. So one way to achieve it is to essentially ensure that everybody in the standardized delivery team, project managers, coders, programmers, whatever, has a multiplicity of skills. So imagine if your programmer was also, skilled and certified in ISO standards or, some sort of security discipline. When they code with the security in mind. And that is more likely to yield secure code than if they weren't. Because if they weren't, they'll just build stuff. But if they are well versed in, actually, this might be a vulnerability. You might have a cross-site scripting issue here. If they know all those things, they might code better or more secure, if I may say. So having that team that is multifaceted and multi-talented creates that capability. The other way is to bring or co-opt the skills from elsewhere. Okay, so, and I'll share a case study, which is my own experience with you on the next slide, but is to co-opt those capabilities and bring them in. So, and if you bring them in, as I said before, you're not bringing them in with the same mandates as where they came from. You're bringing them in with a different mandate. Your job is now to make this happen, not to tell us how it can't happen. We know there are issues, but your job is to make it happen, to help us make it happen. And with that different mandate, they tend to contribute, to collaborate and to pull in the same direction rather than to just say, actually, this is not going to work. Okay? So those are two of the important things that one needs to be mindful of. The next one is really around ensuring that the mandate is clear. The mandate should be delivery focused. It should be very, very clear that this is what we're doing, and we're doing this to the benefits A, B, C. It should be that clear. And once it's clear, then everybody in that unit is aligned to that. And the efforts are collaborative. They sort of synergize. They build on each other rather than essentially, going cross purposes, which sometimes we tend to have in our organization. Then, the other one that I wanted to talk about is metrics. So my father always said that people do what you inspect, not what you expect. So you need to have some ways of inspecting what people do. But one quote that I really like from Peter Drucker, who is widely held as the father of modern management theory, is that you can only improve what you measure. Okay, if you are driving on the motorway and you don't have a speedometer, you don't know if you're breaking the law or not. You don't know certain other things around the dynamics of your car because you simply have no idea how fast you're going. If you don't measure things, and that's why we have so many scales and equipment for measurement, from both for scale to speedometer to your watch, so many things, because we need to know the quantities that we're dealing with. And when people are incentivized and measured from certain other angles, their response and their behavior is different. When they are incentivized and measured from other angles, they will change. And I've had several conversations and witnessed several instances where, people behave a certain way because this is how they are measured and recognized and rewarded. I'll give you an example. I've been in an organization where some of the people in the supply chain function, the procurement function, had their KPIs set on savings. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with setting that because it ensures that we get value for money with our spend. However, if that is the overarching KPI without any balance on quality and other important measures, as was the case in this organization, then you might get a lot of chaff, a lot of rubbish being bought because they were cheap. Yeah, we saved money, but at the end of the day, quality is impaired by the fact that we bought something that really isn't top grade. Okay, and there was once an incident where the person or the people in procurement bought something, they came in, it was later discovered to be not that good, but when they were confronted, they said, yeah, but the organization puts pressure on us to save. So we did that, and we've met our KPIs. You should be applauding us, not chastising us. So in that instance, you saw that when you change the metrics or the focus around measurement, then the behaviors also correspondingly change. So if now you're bringing people into your delivery setting and you're saying to them, now we want to make sure that we're using metrics around turnaround time, time to market, scale, velocity. Once you're using those kind of metrics, then what is happening is those people are now thinking, how can I get this done securely? How can I get it done securely, but get it done within the time and to the quality that is needed? They bring those dynamics into the conversation rather than just being or appearing to be blockers and sort of people who pull things back. Okay, so in a nutshell, I think that these are key things that if you drive into the whole delivery conversation, then you are creating better outcomes, better results, not just from a quality and user-friendly perspective, et cetera, but also from a control and security perspective. It means that when people are, delivering change, they're already in the process of the delivering of the change, they're already mindful of the security requirements and why it needs to be there and how they can build it in at the outset. Okay. Now, the final point I want to make on this slide before I move on is the need for extensive testing. Okay, you can't test enough because it's only through testing and some kind of quality assurance processes that you have that you can essentially ensure that you don't leave too many vulnerabilities or gaps or weaknesses that can go out and expose you or hurt you. So you have to have extensive testing of different kinds. In my organization, for instance, and I'll talk more about it on the next slide, we do unit testing, system testing, integration testing, regression testing, but we also do dress rehearsals. Okay, actually, simulate the whole thing end to end to see how things go. And we've found so many interesting learnings, through the dress rehearsals as well. Okay, so testing. And for those things that, changes that involve software, computer systems or software, I cannot promote pen testing enough. Okay. The amount of vulnerabilities that you can eliminate with a proper, effective pen test regime, unbelievable, and I've seen it myself. Okay, so that I believe is a formula for ensuring that when you deliver change, that the change bears the hallmark of both quality and security. So we can go on to the next slide, please. Okay, now this case study, which I think is relevant to this particular conversation, is my own case study. So this is something that I have experienced myself, and I just want to briefly highlight those experiences. So until March of this year, 2020, my title or my role in my job here at APSA was the transformation and enablement lead. My job was to basically carry what was then Barclays Bank Ghana and turn it into what is now APSA Bank Ghana. So I was the overall program director, program lead, and the accountable exec, and that meant that everything in the program was my responsibility. Now, this is the most complex program that I have done in my career of some 22 years, and I say the most complex because it was enterprise-wide. It involved absolutely everything, from messaging systems to all the banking platforms, to the marketing, branding, legal, documentation, regulatory requirements, even the people aspect, how we get people to come along the journey and to be aligned to the new changes we're bringing, was all my responsibility. And it's the most challenging thing I've ever done, but it's also the most rewarding thing I've ever done. But you can imagine the risks that would apply to such a program. Risk could happen anywhere from the systemic side, the technology side, networks breaking, maybe your core banking going down, all of those elements, or your digital channels where customers can't engage with you and bank with you, to putting out wrong marketing material, to not managing, liquidity risk properly, which means you can have a run on the bank and the bank can collapse. I mean, the risks here were huge. I mean, I sit here today looking back and feeling proud of myself. But if I had put a foot wrong, this bank may not have, may not still be in existence. So I had to do this job with that in mind as I did all the things that I had to do and took all the decisions that I had to take. And I have to say that even down to, at that time, SMS communications that went out from the bank, emails, letters that went out from the bank, none of them left the bank without my personal inspection or review. That is how intense this was. And how did we make sure that we didn't create any undue risks or vulnerabilities that could harm us? Well, it's exactly what I've been saying all along, what this conversation has been about. First of all, we created a hybrid team, an organization that is self-contained, that reported directly to me. So within that organization, we had the marketing elements, we had the finance elements, we had the project management elements, the technology elements, the regulatory compliance elements, and so on and so forth, even security, governance, etc. They were all part of my extended function. That ensures that we could do the following things. We could ensure that all the required skills and capabilities were there. They were co-opted and internalized into the team. So when the team was speaking or the team was doing some sort of endeavor, some sort of initiative, we were looking at it completely, everything, the full spectrum: security, quality, user friendliness, impact on customers, etc., etc. We looked at everything, and I had the mandate to be able to manage that. One thing we also were able to do as a result was to set a clear mandate. Everybody in the team understood that this is what we're trying to do, and we're all in it together. If one fails, all fails. And we describe it as key stakes. There's the expression that we use. Key stakes meaning, all or nothing. If this breaks, we're dead. And that focused the mind. I know it sounds a bit threatening and scary, but it actually focused the mind. And when as a leader, you can make people, appreciate that, yes, it's risky, it's monumental and all that, but we're here and we can do it together, then people sort of relax and appreciate the challenge for what it is. So that was key. And then the next thing is the metrics. So again, we had to set the right performance metrics and the performance contracts with the people so that everybody knew how what they did contributed to the achievement of the whole. And that was very, very important, so that also when we were done with it, that they could be rewarded appropriately for the efforts and contributions and sacrifices, and there were many, many sacrifices that they had put in. And I also wanted to highlight the fact that the change governance aspect was part of the team. So the PMO provided change governance, which I had full visibility of as well. And security and compliance were also part of the team. So, for instance, I co-opted a very experienced compliance relationship manager who worked with me directly, and we were able to address all the compliance and legal requirements, from trademark licensing agreements to transition agreements, contractual agreements, to all the requirements that the regulator, in this case the Bank of Ghana, expected from us. We were able to work through all of them. One way that I maintained visibility of all of these elements is a massive, quite scientific tracker of all risks across all the banking areas. So whether it was change saturation, whether it was technology architecture, whether it was liquidity, market risks, etc. All of that was on my radar, and we looked at on a fortnightly basis how the work that we would do would impact the broader organization and its stakeholders. And that is essentially how we did that. Now, I can't imagine, looking at the size and the complexity of this program, whose budget was almost 200 million Ghana cedis from Ghana perspective. That's just Ghana alone, not the rest of the other countries that were also part of it. I can't imagine how we could have delivered this, so comparatively well change in a certain way to get better outcomes from both quality and security perspective. I have been given feedback that this change, large that it is, has been, it's gone well, well controlled, and has been well received. And I am grateful to God for that. But I think also, okay. Now, um, we have these sort of conversations all the time, and some of these conversations can be overloaded with information and things to track and to remember and stuff like that. If you don't remember anything from this conversation that we're having, I would like you to remember three things, just three. Number one, change is necessary. It must be embraced. We have no choice. It's the way the world is going, and we need to be part of it and swim with the tide and to find ways to even maximize how the results that we get from the tide. Okay, so change is necessary. Get with it. Number two, change must be tackled in this modern contemporary context in an agile manner. If you do change in the ways that we used to do them sort of 2 decades ago, where it's a step-by-step waterfall approach, you deliver something in 12 to 18 months and the world has shifted and it's no longer relevant. So it's important that we do change in a very iterative, customer-focused way. So change must be delivered in an agile manner, and you must continually sort of get the right context so that you fit it in well. And then number three is that the change delivery process itself must embed governance, security, compliance elements within it. If they sit outside, then what my experience is they tend to then have a different focus. Their focus is not necessarily the delivery of the change, but rather, to sort of enumerate or highlight their effectiveness from, catching, all the issues and the risks. So I believe that, ensuring that those skills and capabilities are there, either by having a team that is multi-talented or co-opting the skills and making sure that they are part of the delivery conversation. I think I have come to the end of my submission, and we can now go to the conversational part, the Q&A session, and then I can look at your questions and try to address them. Thank you very much for your time, for taking time to join me this afternoon. And I hope that some of the things that I said has struck a chord with you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands raised or any of you, my friends, asking any questions at this stage. I'm told I might have one, but you can also leave your questions in the chat area, and even if we don't get to address them now, we can arrange with Innovare to sort of post them somewhere or send them to you directly if that would be possible. Let me just quickly check. I'm told that there's a question in the chat area. Okay. So I have a question here from I think a lady, Joyce Engman, and she is asking, did you have a large change advisory board? So I think to answer the question, I need to first of all position what a change advisory board is. Um, there are a number of things that could be that. So what we had was a steering committee, and the steering committee was made up of key senior leaders in the organization, from the MD and the FD and other key senior leaders, as well as members of my project team and other parts of the organization. It wasn't very large. It wasn't very large. It was, I think, around 12 people. So I'm assuming that you would agree that that wasn't very large. But it was designed to provide support and oversight direction for me as the overall program director, so that if we, not only kept the senior leaders abreast on where we are with the program, but also if I needed some specific support that went over my authorization or ability levels, then they helped me. Change advisory board from a change management perspective tends to refer to those the body that approves changes for work, and that is something that we have a centralized version in my organization, and we also have a product approval, a product governance approval function, or team, or committee actually is a better word, which approves these things. And we went to all of them for approval. So once we got the approval, then we just executed. I have seen another couple of questions, but I'm told also that there's one participant who raised his hand. I think it's Maurice also. So if you'd like to ask your question, and then afterwards I will go back to the chat and address those that have typed into the chat. So I don't know if the host can allow the listener to ask this question.
Okay, my name is Maurice from Ghana Health Service. I wanted to know if we could get the slides.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So the slides, Innovare has them. Actually, they are projecting for me, and I'm totally comfortable. I actually created the slides specifically for this conversation, so it belongs to all of us who are partaking in this session. So anybody at all who wants them can have them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I will go to the chat now, since I've addressed that question. Let me go to the chat. So there's a question here from one lady whose name I seem to be familiar with, Letitia Duamfama. And the question is, how did you manage different cultural elements as part of the process, both different company cultures and also different country cultures? How did the cultures impact the process and the delivery? And I think the question alone tells me that this is the same lady that I used to work with some years back. So Letitia, excellent question. And what we have tried to do in this organization, so there's two levels. There is the country level, and then there is the Africa level. And I am obviously responsible 100% for the country level. And I report to a lady called Vanessa, who was responsible for the Africa level. And what we try to do where culture is concerned is to ensure that culture doesn't necessarily impede on the delivery and the governance aspect of the delivery, because we are using very uniform methodologies across the piece. So we define these things and then we define them at the Africa level, and then we can customize them where we have to particular sort of markets, just to make sure that you don't miss out on the nuances, but also there is enough uniformity across that you don't create gaps or misalignment between the different markets and their cultures therein. But within the national or the country environment within Ghana, what we try to do is to ensure that we take our people along on the journey. And we defined a new culture as part of the transition. So it wasn't that we were going to just change the brand, change the signs and everything, repaint the walls red from blue, and everything was fantastic. We realized that the proposition, the strategic proposition that we wanted ABSA to bring was somewhat different from what we wanted Barclays, or what Barclays brought, I should say. And therefore, we had to change the mindsets and the responsiveness and the perspectives, if you like, of our colleagues. So we created a culture wing. So part of my program was culture. And the current HR director had a dotted line into me to work on the culture piece and to make sure that as we are delivering new platforms or migrating existing platforms or rebranding buildings and reconstructing, certain things, as we are doing all of that and changing documentation and rebranding contracts, as we are doing all of that, we are also having a particular set of activities that are designed to make our colleagues appreciate the change, the need for the change, and the imperative to be different and to behave different. So there was a whole set of activities that we initiated on that side as well, Letitia. I hope that addresses your question, but you can come back if you feel there's any other parts that you would like to continue, you'd like me to also talk about. Then I have another question here from Kwesi Boateng. And Kwesi is saying, how did you manage those employees resisting the project? Hey, another very good question. So Kwesi, I think it is human nature that we will have these elements, these sort of resistance, because as I said during my submission, sorry, we can get stuck in our ways. We can sort of be comfortable how things are. We know it, we're comfortable with it, let us continue to be the case. And so there were people who felt threatened by the fact that, if we brought new elements or new, technologies or new tools, they might lose their jobs or they might not be in favor or whatever. There were also people who felt that, the ABSA brand being, in quotes, lesser than a globally renowned Barclays brand meant that, they were going from, big and bold and global to, something that is essentially African. And there were people that had challenges with that. And we had to engage them, So part of my job was to travel up and down the country, visiting my colleagues in branches, in other sites, and having conversations to address their concerns and to demonstrate to them through some of the early deliveries that we could make this what we wanted it to be, and that was the powerful narrative that I was using, which is when it was Barclays, great organization that it is, everything was essentially set. Some 4 leaders had put in place certain things and certain, brand dynamics and documentation and everything, and we just had to follow or to work within that framework. Whereas with ABSA, we get the opportunity, very rare opportunity, to create something new and dynamic and positive. And that narrative got a lot of our colleagues to appreciate where we were coming from and to work with us. So yeah, you can't get 100%, but I think we got enough that we were able to make a success of it. And then I have another question from a chap here. Sorry, Kwesi Boateng, I hope I addressed your question, okay? If not, please feel free to come back. Another chap here called Eric Awuku, and if I'm not mistaken, Eric is somebody who actually works with me here at ABSA Ghana. He's in my team, so it's interesting to see that he was listening and that he has a question for me. If it's a difficult question that I can't answer, then I'll take some points off him. The question is, there's always some form of resistance when it comes to change implementation. How did you manage to overcome such obstacles during your separation journey? And I think, Eric, I think this question is very similar to the one I just addressed for Kwesi Kwesi Boateng. So I won't belabor it, but I'll just rehash the fact that to people want to feel safe. People want to feel like they are relevant, they matter. So in any change endeavor or transformation endeavor, if you want to take people along for the journey, you have to give them the things that they want, that those peculiar things that will make them feel warm and fuzzy. You have to take them along for the journey, and you have to find ways to address their primary concerns. And when we did this, what we realized were the concerns, there were recurring themes. Um, there were recurring themes of concerns. People were concerned, like, if you're bringing new digital tools, then maybe we'll be out of a job. People were concerned that if APSA comes, APSA may find the need to retrench staff because it's a new entity and it wants to be efficient. People were concerned that, as I said earlier on, that the APSA brand is not as big and powerful as the Barclays brand, and they didn't know what that would mean for them. So there were all these, consistent themes around the concerns. And what we had to do, myself taking the lead, is to ensure that those concerns were adequately addressed. Like I said, you can't get 100%. I've certainly never seen it. But if you can do enough and get most people, 80, 85%, perhaps even 90% on a very, very good outing, if you can get those percentages going with you, then you're headed in the right direction. Okay. Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. I see that my host has put a comment there. I don't know if you guys are watching, but it says, rather than share the slides, we will post a full recording of this webinar on our YouTube page at Innovare GH, and then I guess you can go watch. But Albert, let me also say that the recording will be fantastic, but I think some people might want transcript and things. They might want to see the actual text and stuff. So if you could, it would be good for you to share the slides as well. Okay. Joyce came back. Joyce Engman came back and asked another question. Joyce is saying, how long did the transition take? So the transition overall end to end took about 2.5 years. Okay. We deliberately did a 2.5 year journey because we wanted to make sure that things were properly bedded and properly managed and controlled. So, and as I said, there were many facets to this. So the 2.5 year journey involved, the initial stages of planning and ensuring that everything was, properly sort of defined and clear, all the way through to the execution stages and all the various different aspects of it. So yeah, that's how long it took, and it was a very exciting, challenging experience. I spent about 15 weekends, including nights, in the office with teams working to move platforms or install new platforms. Well, part of the ask, the mandate for me was, you have to do this without disrupting any existing services. So you can imagine, it's like being told that you're driving at 100 miles an hour and you have to change all the tires on the car, but you can't stop. You have to change it while you're still driving. I mean, this was how this program was like, but it was fantastic. I have another request here from a chap called Michael Odro Entry. And Michael says, kindly share one mistake or fallout that resulted from the project implementation. Okay, let me see. One mistake. So I think overall, okay, lessons learned. Overall, I think the project was quite well managed, and we had no choice, because the nature of this project was that if we had too many failures that were material, it could mean quite significant damage to the bank. So we did things and double checked. We go through the governance processes. We make sure that we have the right stakeholders behind us. We got the approvals. We did dress rehearsals. So for instance, I'll give you an example, Michael. I had to move our core banking platform, which was sitting in a data center in Gloucester in the UK. I had to move it from the UK to South Africa. Now, the core banking platform is the heart of any bank. That is where everything resides, from all your transactions to your accounts, everything lives in the core banking. And if you lose your core banking for a week, you will die as a bank. So moving it, and you're moving it, I mean, you're actually sort of picking up this core banking and taking it to South Africa. Um, because of the criticality of it, we had to plan it well, you know. So there was a lot of planning and looking at the architecture and how we do it, etc. And then we had to do certain tests, so minor tests. If we move this, how will it behave? What is the latency like? It's going across the internet. Will it be fast enough? So there were all those things. But what really made the difference, Michael, is the dress rehearsals. So unbeknownst to the rest of you, we were testing, we're actually simulating. Before we did it for real in April of last year, we simulated. We came into the office, we did some preparations on Wednesday and Thursday, and my team and I worked all the way through Friday night, through Saturday, into Sunday, just to try and make sure that we simulated how the platform would work if it was moved into South Africa. So we did that, and we did that 9 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, just so that every time we did it, we learned something, we changed something, we improved something, and eventually we got it right and we did it for real. So it's just to emphasize the fact that you need to ensure that you are not creating any vulnerabilities when you have very critical change to make. There were many lessons learned, and I forget most of them unless I actually go to the documentation, some of which will also be too confidential to share. But ultimately, in terms of sort of mistakes and things, by the time we did some of these things for real, we have perfected how we did them. I have another question here from Richard Edward Osei. And Richard is asking me, were there any regulatory setbacks or delays that affected the process? The only, and thank you, Richard, that's a very good question. And I must say that the regulatory side is one of the things that I also enjoyed, because I was directly accountable for this, and I was exposed to the BOG. And I went to the BOG for meetings and questions and grillings like about 17 times during the program. And I must say that the regulator, Bank of Ghana, was very supportive. So BOG was supportive because they see us as a systemically important bank in Ghana, and therefore they want to make sure that we remain there and relevant and servicing customers and contributing to the economy at large. So they were very supportive. We had many conversations. They really wanted to make sure that we were on top of this change. So they did grill me many times to try and make sure that I was on top of my game. And I think all of them went quite well. The only delay, in quotes, that we had, which affected things a little bit, but not too much, was we sent to the BOG a list of 56 items, essentially, which included transition services arrangements, the TTML, which is the trademark licensing agreements that we had with both ABSA and Barclays, and schedules for specific projects and services that we needed their approval on. We sent 56 to them. And they approved one very early on, but the remaining 55 sat there for a long time. And, it was very challenging, because here I am trying to deliver projects, and the projects I need their approval for, but I wasn't getting the approval. But at the same time, I couldn't stop because we had a finite timeline. The agreement between us and Barclays regulatory entities was that we had to finish everything by the 31st of May this year. Everything had to be done. So you can imagine you have that locked in timeline and you're not getting the approval. So that was a challenge, and I had to find various ways. Eventually, I had to escalate to my boss, the chief executive here. And she sort of also engaged with the deputy governor to say, listen, you guys say we're important, and if we're important, then please give us the support. And that helped. So eventually I got the approval. But one thing that BOG did, which was very, very helpful, even in spite of these delays, they actually told me, listen, we may not have formally approved these things, but you can still go ahead because we know you've got a timeline to meet. So do go ahead. We are reviewing it. We'll come back to you. You have our support. I have another question, and Albert, my host, I'm looking to you for timekeeping, okay, because looks like the questions are coming thick and fast now. I have another question here from a chap called Henry Annan, and Henry says, or is asking, did the movement involve migration of data onto ABSA's own software? Absolutely. So data migration is one of those things that we had to be particularly careful of, okay? And it permeated a number of the things that we did. So I'll give you two examples. One I've already done, but I'll pick up on it again. We moved our entire HR mechanisms from all the platforms that they were on to a new platform called Workday, okay? And so Workday was essentially new. We deployed it fresh, and we had to get all the legacy data, people's history, employment history, appraisals, etc., into Workday. So you can imagine if we didn't do a good job from a data mapping, data migration, data integrity perspective, you know, I might have the cleaner's salary, the MD might have one of my colleagues' salary. I mean, it would be a nightmare situation. So data was one of the things that we had to be particularly circumspect on. You know, make sure that we are mapping things properly, that integrity is there, privacy, you know, only people who could see certain elements of data could see them, and so on and so forth. So data was big. Throughout this program, it's probably, you know, the most critical element that that we did on the system side. You know, don't forget that there was a whole branding side as well that we were looking at. And then the other example is the core banking. So as I said earlier on, the core banking platform is and prompted that our time is indeed up. I thank you very much for joining me again, for your time, for your questions. I hope that this has been as illuminating for you as it has for me. And I wish you all the best in your ongoing endeavors. You know, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me out there. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. You can also drop me an email at ebo.richardson at gmail.com. And I wish you all the best. Thank you very much. I have one last question here, and maybe to avoid any reprisals, with Albert's permission, maybe I'll see if I can quickly address it. It's from a chap called Labi. Well, I'm assuming it's a chap because it's just Labi, and it could be a surname as well. Forgive me. Were there any other African countries who had completed their migration who had lessons to share prior to ABSA Ghana migration completing? No, absolutely not. So we did all of these things around the same time. So there might have been a few days here and there between us, but we did them all around the same time. Because we had a finite time from the group perspective to make this happen, we needed to make sure that, you know, when we're getting them done, we got them done, that we didn't have a lot of time to play around. So unfortunately, so, you know, many times that we were doing some of these things, we were going into the unknown. Okay. All right. So guys, people, thank you very much once again. Thank you.